'Tis I. Hey everyone, glad to see you back, glad to see you looking fresh. So today I wanted to sit and chat about the DCU and all the DC projects going forward, how it's going to relate to the comic book industry as a whole, how it's going to go up against the MCU, all kinds of different stuff. So the DCU, as I guess what we're going to call the DC universe going forward, we're done with the days of the DCEU, which the DCU just sounds better. It obviously is playing off of the MCU, but also, DC Universe, so it makes a lot of sense. So the DCU doesn't officially start, I guess, until 2025, where we have a brand new Superman film, which is beyond exciting for me. I love Superman, as you all know. He's my favorite character, period. Just flat out. Superman is my favorite character. So the fact that we're finally getting another solo Superman film, not had one since 2013, that's crazy to think it's been that long, but we're finally getting another one. James Gunn is writing it, which is very exciting. I really like his writing on a lot of different stuff. Obviously, I love the Suicide Squad movie. The Guardians movies are really good. All his movies lately have been fantastic. Not only are we getting Superman, but we're getting Supergirl, which is going to be another temple in this franchise. That's awesome. Supergirl hasn't had her own movie since the 80s, and that movie might honestly be the worst film I have ever seen in my entire life. So I am super happy that they're getting more out of this character, one that's needed it for a long, long time. Of course, we're getting another Batman, but we're also keeping Robert Pattinson's Batman in this new set. DC Elseworld is what they're calling it, which is everything not related to the DCU, but stuff that is still making money, so might as well keep doing it, right? So we're getting the Batman Part 2, we're getting the sequel to the Joker, stuff like Teen Titans Go is going to continue, and I put it behind me because I'm hopeful that Teen Titans Season 6 might manifest somewhere in there. James Gunn is pretty in the know with what fans seem to want, and he's not the type to just give you everything you want. He does know what the fans are after. And so I think it's possible that it happens. I'm not saying it's going to happen. And I, of course, would be totally shocked if it does. Just putting it out there, it's something I would love to see. Like I said, Superman, Supergirl, both excellent. We have new Batman and Robin, which is, we haven't had a Batman and Robin movie since the 90s, and that didn't go too well the first time. But this one's Damian Wayne, which is, you didn't know, is Batman's son. Basically, Damian Wayne is an estranged son. It's his son by blood, but he wasn't raised by Batman. He was raised by League of Assassins, and yeah, I'm going to stop myself right there because I could probably go way too deep into it. But interested who they pick as Batman this time, because every time they say who Batman's going to be, it's like it's one of the biggest deals with the announcement of the new Batman. So that's going to be interesting who they pick. But on top of that, we also have a film about the Authority, a group of heroes, villains. They're not really either, but that's about all I know about them. I've seen them around, but I'm not going to sit here and say I know all their names off the top of my head and I know their backstories and all that. But I'm intrigued, to say the least, because James Gunn, back in 2014, gave us a group of heroes that, no one really knew and made them household names. So I don't think he's, necessarily writing this or directing this, but he being one part of the head of this now, I feel like we could get something more akin to his abilities as opposed to just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and hoping it sticks. We also have some TV coming out. There's one about Amanda Waller, which I'm not that stoked about. It's just, Amanda Waller's fine, but we've seen her plenty of times. We have one called Paradise Lost, which is about Themyscira, and he said it's like Game of Thrones, which cool. If that works, that's awesome. We have a Green Lantern show, which I was like, oh. He's like, Green Lantern show. I was like, okay. But that's one step closer to getting a new Green Lantern movie, which I feel like is much more needed for a character of that level and that importance and the powers as crazy as they can pull off. A show doesn't seem to fully get there for me, but I haven't seen it yet. I don't know what the script is like. I don't know nothing about it. So 2 Green Lanterns in that, awesome. What I'm most looking forward to is Swamp Thing. I know you could be there and be like, yo, Dan, you just said Superman's your favorite character. What's up with that? And I know, But Superman's never going anywhere. You know, I always have an infinite supply of Superman stuff to enjoy. And that's not a bad thing for me, for sure. But a character like Swamp Thing is not a character we have infinite supply of. Weirdly enough, we have 2 movies that came out even before the 89 Batman, which those are something. So, and we have that show that got canceled way too soon. We have a movie which is said to be a horror movie, which that's awesome. And if they make Swamp Thing to be like a pivotal character in this universe, would be awesome. That's a character that deserves the respect of that level, but, you know, just in pop culture, he's just not really there. He's obviously not the level of Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, but he's not even like the level of like Aquaman and the Flash. Like, he's not even close to that bar. So to bring him up to that would be awesome. As a fan of Swamp Thing and a fan of that story, that beyond awesome. And, you know, all this talk about the DCU in movie-wise and TV-wise, they also mentioned video games, which has me very excited because I've complained a lot about the lack of superhero games because obviously box office-wise and more television-wise, superheroes like rule the industry. And video games are not untouched, but they're a lot more untouched than those two are. Obviously, we have great games like Spider-Man and stuff from DC, like the Arkham franchise, but we do not have a consistent flow of great superhero games coming out. And I get that developing a game in a world and a combat system and a storyline, all this is very complicated and a lot of stuff I don't know about. But I don't grasp why Marvel hasn't tried harder to jump into that market, because if you're telling me that you wouldn't want to play games based on Iron Man where you can fly around New York City, or Thor where you can fight mythological monsters, or Hulk where you can bash through cities, and obviously like Spider-Man where you can flip around, and Wolverine's getting a game, and like we're building momentum here, but there's so much more potential there that has been untouched. So I'm excited to see that DC is stepping up to that and saying like, yeah, we're doing games. And, you know, obviously we have like the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League coming out this year. But other than that, we don't know much about DC video game plans in the future. So I'm excited to see what's going on with that. And all this talk about the DCU and everything. Video games, movies, TV. That's not to say that Marvel's just going to get run over here. Marvel has staked their claim basically as the one to beat. Not only in just the comic book world, but in the entire like cinematic universe attempt. They are like the one to talk about. And obviously there have been others where you can like point fingers and be like, yo, but also like the original Universal Monsters kind of did it first. And what about all those Godzilla movies and from Japan that did it? And true, but those didn't make the money that Marvel's making now. I'm not going to tell you that the cultural relevance of some of these Marvel characters top that of a Godzilla or a Dracula, because they do not. Like, Dracula's been around for how long? Dracula, the Wolfman, the Mummy, Frankenstein, all that. And Godzilla, you know, Mothra and all them. But now we have the likes of your Captain Americas, your Iron Mans, your Spider-Mans. They're the talk now of cinematic universes. But Marvel is in a weird situation right now, where obviously they still make a lot of money. Every time a new movie comes out, a lot of money comes their way. And I'm recording this right before Ant-Man and the Wasp comes out, so I will have a link in the description to go to my Letterboxd review of what I thought about Quantumanium. Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumanium, which is the start of Phase 5. No disrespect to Ant-Man, any Ant-Man fans, any Wasp fans, but, I mean, they're no Superman. And I'm not saying that to be mean for sure, but I'm saying it as a point of like, Marvel has used a lot of their big characters, and I think they know that. I think they're well aware that, oh, we're done with Captain America, we're done with Iron Man. Hulk is a weird situation because we got to work with Universal, and, you know, Spider-Man's in a weird spot right now because his trilogy just wrapped up. So what do they have? they obviously still have Thor, which after Thor 4, I'm sure a lot of people aren't going to be super psyched about again. Hawkeye has been demoted to a TV show, and Black Widow is also gone. Half of our original 6 are able to show up. So they're continuously making new characters to fill up that void. We have your She-Hulks, and you have your Riri Williams, and the Falcons now stepped up to be Captain America, so you have that, and we have a bunch of characters just trying to fill in voids of the past. Like, one big central star is much better than a lot of little stars. That's just my take on that. But, MCU is going to have to, not pick up the pace for sure, but they're going to have to step the quality up a little bit. It's not even like a personal opinion at that point. It's like people are not stoked with Phase 4 as a whole. Obviously, there's the arguments, well, they're trying to build something new, and Phase 1 wasn't the best thing in the world, and this and that. And you're right, Phase 1 had plenty of problems, but coming off of the hype of Phase 3 and the whole end of the Infinity Saga, the momentum just fell off a cliff. And you can blame, the P word for that, but it started off strong. WandaVision started off strong, and people were excited and talking about it week to week, and then the ending happened, and we're like, oh, okay. And then the next thing was Falcon the Winter Soldier, which wasn't the greatest thing I've ever seen, and I feel like just as it went on and on and on, and eventually got to the point where it got so overwhelming that it felt like homework, and even now, I feel like it's kind of homework to just keep up with this. And, I love this stuff. I love movies, and I love comic book heroes, and all of this stuff. But for me, it's like, all right, I gotta go see Ant-Man. And I'm not upset to go do it. If I didn't want to do it, I wouldn't do it. But at a point, it's where do people draw the line? It's so increasingly hard to recommend people to get into the MCU, and a lot of people aren't still. Say I wanted to show these to my parents or whatever. I wanted to go over, and I wanted to show them, and I wanted to talk about them, and I wanted to be like, hey, when Endgame came out, and I wanted to talk to them about them, I'm like, well, I can't. They're not going to know what's going on. But at that point, it was like, all right, watch 20-some movies, and you'll be set. Which, even that's a lot. That's so much work. And it's like, well, it's so much work to watch movies. I guess, yeah, if you make that argument. But to enjoy one movie, you have to watch 20-some others. That's the reward for doing it. And a lot of people have done it. And that's why that movie's so successful. But at this point, what's the reward for watching all of that and getting to, Multiverse of Madness? Right? That movie's not the greatest thing in the world. So it's like you're getting an immense payoff. You get, some payoff. But you can't watch Multiverse of Madness without having seen the first Doctor Strange. You hadn't seen WandaVision. You hadn't seen all of Wanda's and Vision's story before that. So you gotta watch Age of Ultron at least. But then you also have to know that he dies in Infinity War. And you have to know that the whole thing happened with Doctor Strange in Infinity War and Endgame. But that goes back to the thing of, you need to understand all of it to know what happens in Endgame. So that's what I'm talking about. MCU needs to, clean it up a little bit. I think that's why the DCU can kick off well. If they don't get super bogged down, and you need to know this, and this, and this, and then having stuff build on each other is totally fine. Having callbacks to what happened previously is totally fine. But to have just constantly, you need to know this, and this before you can even watch this thing, which to a lot of people just seems like a sequel to a movie that came out a couple years ago. But it's not. It's a sequel to 20 things. And the argument can be made also that the MCU now works much like just a big old TV show. And that every movie and show in their own right is just another episode that treks on. In doing that, I don't know if you're making increasingly rewatchable individual films, or if you're just watching pieces of a puzzle that are going to be harder and harder and harder to recommend to people. That's what I hope the DCU can do, because just looking at the movies that came out in the last 3 years, I haven't rewatched really anything from the MCU. I've watched Spider-Man again, but I've rewatched The Batman, and I've rewatched The Suicide Squad. In that argument, it's like, well, clearly DC is doing better. For me, for my personal taste, yeah. That's where it gets confusing, and that's where this whole argument comes to a head of, like, DCU versus MCU. What's going to happen? We don't know until it happens. They might just perfectly live in harmony. And, 2025 apparently is supposed to be the end of the multiverse saga. So, there's a lot more movies and shows that come in the next 2 years. Which is 2023, 4, and 5, so. I just wish I don't know. I wish a lot of things for both of these franchises. But anyway, that's where I'm going to end it here. This video ended up being a lot bigger than I expected it to be. A lot more ranting about how the MCU and the DCU could work. But what are you most looking forward to from either of these franchises? Maybe you think I'm crazy. Maybe you don't care about DC at all. Maybe you're sick of Marvel and you're super stoked to see what DC has to offer. Let me know down below. As always, thank you so very much for watching. Like this if you like this. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you at some point.